If I had listened to my wife that morning, I would have gone straight home. Instead, I was waiting my wife in the airport to surprise her, and everything I believed about my marriage died before my eyes. My name is Ethan Carter. I was 39 years old, living in Dallas, Texas, where I owned a fast-growing transportation software company that helped freight carriers move goods across America more efficiently. People who knew me often said I had everything a man could hope for. Looking back now, I realize appearances can become the most convincing lies of all. None of this happened overnight. The story really began 12 years earlier, in Boston. I was attending a technology conference after presenting software that almost nobody believed would succeed. Only one person waited after the presentation ended. Her name was Olivia Carter. Back then she was Olivia Bennett. She smiled, introduced herself, and asked thoughtful questions about my work instead of congratulating me with empty compliments. She saw possibility before anyone else did. That conversation lasted 20 minutes. It changed the rest of my life. Our first date wasn't expensive. We shared burgers at a small restaurant overlooking the Charles River. The chairs were uncomfortable. The fries were cold. Neither of us noticed. We talked until the employees stacked chairs around us. I remember driving home with the windows down, smiling for reasons I couldn't explain. For the first time, my future felt larger than my fears. My mother noticed it immediately. She watched me walk into her kitchen the next morning, wearing the same smile. Without asking a single question, she laughed softly. I've seen that look before. What look? The look of a man who finally met someone worth protecting. She liked Olivia from the beginning. Before our wedding, she held both my hands and shared advice I have never forgotten. Character is revealed during ordinary days, not special occasions. Watch how people love when nobody is watching. At the time, those words sounded beautiful. Years later, they became unforgettable. Our wedding was simple. A small vineyard outside Austin. White flowers. Close family. A warm evening breeze. Nothing extravagant. Neither of us wanted luxury. We wanted peace. For several years, that's exactly what we had. We rented a modest house while I built my company from a spare bedroom that doubled as my office. There were nights when I worked until sunrise, fixing software problems before clients woke up. Olivia never complained. She brought coffee into my office without interrupting my concentration. Sometimes she simply kissed my forehead before quietly leaving the room. Those silent gestures meant more than grand speeches. When our first major contract arrived, we celebrated with takeout pizza because expensive restaurants still felt unnecessary. We promised ourselves something that night. No matter how successful life became, we would never let money become more important than each other. It seemed like an easy promise. Success arrived slowly. One client became 5. 5 became 20. Within a few years, our software managed freight operations across several states. We hired talented employees, moved into a larger office, bought our dream home. From the outside, our lives appeared almost perfect. Inside, something else was happening. Not dramatic, not obvious. Just small changes that seemed harmless. Business required more travel. Some weeks I flew to Chicago, other weeks to Denver or Seattle. Olivia also began representing the company at conferences and industry events. Our calendars became crowded. Dinner conversations became video calls. Weekends disappeared beneath meetings and flight schedules. Whenever I apologized, she smiled. We're building our future. I believed her. Maybe because I wanted to. Maybe because trust is easier than suspicion. Every evening before sleeping, we followed one tradition. No matter where we were, we called each other. Sometimes the conversations lasted an hour, sometimes only 5 minutes, but we never skipped them. Until one Tuesday, Olivia called much later than usual. She sounded exhausted. She blamed a networking dinner that had gone longer than expected. Nothing about her explanation felt strange. Still, after we ended the call, I found myself staring at my phone much longer than necessary. A feeling settled inside me. Not fear, not jealousy, just something impossible to describe. Like hearing distant thunder beneath a clear blue sky. I pushed the thought away. Successful marriages survive because people choose trust. At least, that's what I kept telling myself. A few days later, Olivia received an invitation to speak at a national transportation summit in Seattle. It was an incredible opportunity. She hesitated before accepting. "You'll be traveling that week too," she said. "I don't want us living in airports." I smiled. "It's only 6 days. We'll make up for it afterward." She hugged me tightly. "I promise." Promises are strange things. When they're spoken, they sound permanent. Only later do you discover how fragile words can become. The morning she left, I drove her to the airport before sunrise. She leaned across the center console and kissed me goodbye. "I'll miss you. I'll miss you more." She laughed. "I don't think that's possible." I watched her disappear through the terminal doors until I could no longer see her. For reasons I still can't explain, my mother's voice echoed inside my mind one more time. The strongest homes aren't protected by locked doors, Ethan. They're protected by honest hearts. I smiled, started my car, and drove toward the office. I had no idea those words were about to become the most important lesson of my life. People often ask when a marriage begins to fall apart. Most expect a dramatic answer, a shocking argument, a discovered message, a confession. That wasn't my story. Our marriage didn't collapse in one night. It drifted quietly, almost politely, until I stopped recognizing the distance between us. The week after Olivia flew to Seattle, I buried myself in work. Our company was preparing to launch a new logistics platform that could reduce delivery times for thousands of trucking companies across the country. Investors were watching us closely. Every meeting carried pressure. Every decision carried risk. Still, no matter how busy I became, I always looked forward to our nightly phone calls. Hearing Olivia's voice reminded me why I worked so hard. She wasn't chasing luxury. Neither was I. We wanted stability. We wanted freedom. Most of all, we wanted to build a future where our children would never wonder whether their parents loved each other. At least, that was the dream we had shared. The first few days passed normally. She told me about the conference, the keynote speakers, the crowded networking events, the endless interviews. I told her about software updates, investor meetings, and another warehouse client we had just signed. Everything sounded ordinary, almost rehearsed. On the fourth evening, something changed. Our call lasted less than 3 minutes. She sounded distracted. I heard voices in the background. Music, laughter. She apologized. "I'm heading into another dinner with potential partners." "You should go," I answered. "I'll call tomorrow. I love you." "I love you too." The line disconnected. For reasons I couldn't explain, I looked at the phone for several seconds before putting it down. The conversation felt incomplete. Not dishonest. Just unfinished. The next morning, my mother called. She rarely phoned during business hours. "I was thinking about you," she said. "You sound tired." "I've just been working." She stayed silent for a moment. Then she repeated advice I had heard since childhood. "A peaceful heart doesn't ignore difficult questions, Ethan. It has the courage to ask them." I laughed softly. "You always know when something's bothering me." A mother usually does. Before hanging up, she added one more sentence. "Protect your marriage by protecting your conversations." Those words stayed with me all day. That evening, Olivia didn't answer my first call. Or my second. She finally called back nearly 2 hours later. "I'm sorry. I figured you were busy. I fell asleep." It seemed believable. She looked exhausted during our video call. I told myself not to overthink it. Trust is impossible without giving someone the benefit of the doubt. The conference ended 2 days later. Olivia sent pictures from the closing ceremony. She looked beautiful, professional, confident. Hundreds of people congratulated her online. I couldn't have been prouder. Our employees even organized a small celebration inside the office after seeing her presentation receive national attention. Everyone admired us. Everyone called us the perfect couple. Sometimes I wondered whether they admired the real marriage, or only the version they saw through photographs. Life quickly returned to its normal rhythm. Or at least it appeared to. 3 weeks later, One of our biggest clients invited several executives to Denver for contract negotiations. I couldn't attend because another investor meeting had already been scheduled. Olivia offered to represent the company instead. "You've done this before," I said. "You'll do great." She smiled. "I'll be back Friday night." Before leaving, she hugged me a little longer than usual. I noticed it, but I interpreted it as affection. Nothing more. The Denver meetings went extremely well. She called after signing the contract. "We got everything we wanted." "I knew you would. You owe me dinner." "I owe you much more than dinner." She laughed. I'll collect." Her return flight was scheduled for Friday afternoon. I planned to finish work early so we could spend the weekend together. Then an emergency software failure hit one of our largest clients. Thousands of shipments stopped updating. My engineering team rushed into the conference room. Every minute cost money. Every delayed truck created another complaint. By the time the crisis ended, it was nearly midnight. I felt terrible for missing Olivia's arrival home. When I finally opened the front door, the house was dark. She had already gone to bed. The next morning she seemed unusually quiet. Not angry, just distant. I assumed she was disappointed that work had come first again. "I'll make it up to you," I promised. "I know you will," she replied with a smile that never quite reached her eyes. The following month became our busiest season since founding the company. Clients doubled. Travel increased. Sleep became optional. One evening, my assistant placed a folder on my desk. "These are next month's travel schedules." I flipped through them absent-mindedly. Then one page caught my attention. Olivia had accepted another speaking invitation. This one was in Seattle again. She hadn't mentioned it. I stared at the page for several seconds. Maybe she simply forgot. Maybe she planned to tell me later. There were countless reasonable explanations. Yet something deep inside refused to settle. That night I asked her about the trip. She paused, only for a second. Then she smiled. "I wanted to surprise you after everything was confirmed." I smiled back. But for the first time in our marriage, my smile felt heavier than my heart. And without realizing it, I made a decision that would quietly set everything else in motion. I decided that this time, I would surprise her instead. The moment I decided to surprise Olivia, it felt like the easiest decision I had made in months. I wasn't trying to catch her doing anything. I wasn't investigating my wife. I simply wanted us to remember who we had been before conference schedules, business dinners, and delayed flights became normal. Some people celebrate love with expensive gifts. Others write letters. I believed the greatest gift I could give was my time. The following Monday, I quietly cleared my calendar for the week of her Seattle conference. My executive team was surprised. "You've never taken 5 consecutive days off," my operations director said. "I think my marriage deserves them." He smiled. I wish more founders thought that way. So did I. For years, I had convinced myself I was sacrificing today to build a better tomorrow. The company was thriving. Our software now coordinated freight movements in 42 states. We had opened a second headquarters in Dallas and signed partnerships with several national carriers. Investors wanted faster expansion. Banks offered financing. Business magazines began requesting interviews. Everyone celebrated our success. Few understood its cost. There were birthdays I had missed. Anniversaries interrupted by conference calls. Vacations cancelled because another client needed immediate attention. Every sacrifice had seemed justified. Now I wanted to reclaim something money could never replace. Time with my wife. That evening, I booked my own flight to Seattle. Not to attend the conference, only to meet Olivia after her closing presentation. I imagined surprising her outside the convention center. We would spend 2 quiet days together before returning home. No meetings, no investors, no deadlines, just us. I kept the entire plan secret. Even my assistant didn't know why I had suddenly blocked 3 days on my calendar. She assumed I was finally taking a vacation. Maybe I was. Or maybe I was trying to save something I hadn't realized was slipping away. Over the next 2 weeks, Olivia seemed happier. She laughed more during our phone calls. She talked excitedly about preparing her keynote speech. Watching her enthusiasm reminded me why I had fallen in love with her. She was passionate, driven, confident without being arrogant. When she believed in something, she gave it everything she had. I admired that about her. The conference arrived sooner than expected. The morning she left, I carried her suitcase to the front door. She wrapped her arms around me. "I'll be home before you know it. I'll be counting the hours." She smiled. "You always say that." "Because it's always true." Before climbing into the car, she looked back one last time and waved. I stood in the driveway until her rideshare disappeared around the corner. Something about that moment lingered longer than it should have. Not because anything looked wrong, because everything looked so normal. Sometimes, the most ordinary memories become the ones you replay forever. The conference lasted 5 days. Olivia texted regularly. Photos arrived every evening. Large conference halls, networking dinners, award ceremonies, group pictures with transportation executives. Everything matched exactly what she had described. I never questioned any of it. During the same week, my own workload became unusually light. For the first time in years, I left the office before sunset several days in a row. I visited my mother. She noticed immediately. "I haven't seen you this relaxed in a long time." "I'm taking a few days off." She smiled proudly. "For yourself?" "For Olivia." She laughed softly. "Good." Then her expression became thoughtful. "You know, Ethan, when your father was alive, he believed providing money was the greatest proof of love." She looked toward the garden before continuing. "He learned too late that presence is often worth more than provision." Those words stayed with me throughout the drive home. On Thursday evening, I packed a small suitcase without telling Olivia. One change of clothes. My laptop. A framed photograph from our first anniversary. I planned to leave it inside our hotel room before she arrived. A reminder that no amount of professional success could replace the life we had built together. Friday morning finally arrived. My flight departed shortly after sunrise. As the plane climbed above the clouds, I found myself smiling like a young husband again. I imagined Olivia's face when she saw me, her surprise, her laughter, the way she would probably accuse me of being impossibly romantic. The thought made me laugh quietly. The passenger beside me looked over. "Good news?" "The best kind." He nodded knowingly. "I hope whoever you're visiting realizes how lucky they are." So do I. After landing in Seattle, I checked into a hotel only 10 minutes from the convention center. I left the anniversary photograph on the bedside table, exactly as planned. Beside it, I placed a handwritten note. "No matter how busy life becomes, I'll always choose us." Reading those words filled me with peace. For the first time in months, I believed we were finally putting each other first again. That afternoon, I watched the conference live stream from my hotel room. Olivia stood confidently before hundreds of industry leaders. She received a standing ovation. Pride filled my chest. That was my wife. The woman who had believed in my dreams before anyone else. The woman I couldn't wait to surprise. When her presentation ended, I picked up the bouquet of white roses I had ordered earlier that morning. White had always been her favorite. Elegant, simple, timeless. I checked the arrival schedule for her flight back to Dallas. Everything was perfectly on time. An idea suddenly crossed my mind. Instead of surprising her in Seattle, why not surprise her when she arrived home? She believed I would still be working when she landed. Waiting at the airport would be even more meaningful. I smiled to myself. Sometimes the simplest ideas become the most unforgettable ones. I booked the next available flight back to Dallas. As my plane lifted into the evening sky, I looked out the window, completely unaware that I was flying toward the day that would divide my life into 2 chapters. The man I had been, and the man I was about to become. I had imagined this moment 100 different ways. In every version, Olivia smiled the instant she saw me. She would laugh, drop her suitcase, wrap her arms around my neck, tell me I was completely impossible. Instead, I stood outside Terminal D at Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport, holding a bouquet of white roses while watching the arrivals screen change from landed to baggage claim. Families reunited all around me. Children ran toward waiting parents. Soldiers embraced their spouses. Friends laughed as they exchanged hugs. The terminal felt alive with joy. I smiled to myself. In just a few minutes, I would finally see my wife again. The long weeks apart would be over. I checked my phone. No new messages. That wasn't unusual. Passengers rarely texted while walking through the terminal. I straightened my jacket, picked up the flowers, and moved closer to the arrival doors. My heart felt lighter than it had in months. The automatic doors opened. Passengers began streaming into the terminal. Business travelers, college students, young families pushing strollers. I searched every face. Then I saw Olivia. Even after 12 years together, I recognized her instantly. She wore the navy green dress I had bought for her birthday 2 years earlier. Her hair rested neatly over one shoulder. She looked beautiful. For one brief second, nothing else existed. I took one step forward, then another. I raised the flowers. Before I could call her name, someone walked beside her. A tall man, early 40s, confident, well-dressed. He wasn't simply walking next to my wife. He was holding her hand, not loosely, not accidentally. Their fingers were intertwined. The bouquet slipped slightly inside my hand. My body refused to move. Surely there had to be an explanation. People help strangers all the time. Maybe she had twisted her ankle. Maybe he was assisting her through the crowded terminal. I tried desperately to believe my own excuses. Then he smiled at her. She smiled back. It wasn't the polite smile people give acquaintances. It was warm, comfortable, intimate. The kind of smile I hadn't seen directed at me in a very long time. My stomach tightened. Everything around me suddenly became strangely quiet. Announcements continued over the loudspeakers. Children kept laughing. Suitcases rolled across polished floors. Yet every sound seemed distant, as though I was standing underwater. Olivia looked up. Our eyes met. The smile disappeared from her face instantly. She stopped walking. The man beside her followed her gaze. He looked directly at me. Then something unexpected happened. He didn't appear confused. He appeared concerned. As though he already knew exactly who I was. Olivia slowly released his hand. Not because she wanted to, because she had been caught. Ethan, her voice barely reached me. I couldn't answer. The flowers suddenly weighed 100 pounds. She took one cautious step forward. I can explain. Those 4 words destroyed something inside me. People don't explain innocent moments. They explain guilty ones. The stranger remained where he was. His expression carried neither arrogance nor fear, only discomfort. He looked like a man standing in the middle of a tragedy he never wanted to witness. I forced myself to speak. Who is he? Olivia closed her eyes. For just a second, long enough for silence to become unbearable. The man answered instead. My name is Daniel. His voice was calm, respectful, almost apologetic. I think we should talk. I looked at Olivia. How long? She didn't answer. I asked again. How long? Tears filled her eyes. 8 months. The number struck harder than any physical blow. 8 months. 8 months of phone calls. 8 months of business trips. 8 months of hearing I love you. 8 months of believing distance was the only thing separating us. My mother had once told me something after my father admitted a painful mistake. The truth rarely arrives all at once, Ethan. It falls one piece at a time until the whole picture becomes impossible to ignore. Standing inside that airport, I finally understood what she meant. I lowered the bouquet. The white roses slipped from my hand and scattered across the polished floor. Neither of them tried to pick them up. Daniel took one slow step toward me. I never wanted you to find out like this. I stared at him. You knew she was married. He lowered his head. Yes, and you stayed anyway. Another silence. Then he nodded. Yes. Oddly enough, his honesty hurt more than another lie would have. Olivia reached toward my arm. I stepped back before she could touch me. She began crying openly now. I never planned for this. I laughed quietly. It wasn't amusement. It was disbelief. Nobody plans to destroy a marriage, Olivia. A small crowd had begun noticing us. People slowed their pace. Some pretended not to watch. Others openly stared. I suddenly realized I didn't want strangers witnessing the worst moment of my life. I took a deep breath. Then I did something neither of them expected. I picked up the crushed bouquet from the floor, straightened my jacket, looked directly into Olivia's eyes, and spoke as calmly as I possibly could. Let's go somewhere private. Neither of them moved, because none of us knew that the next conversation would uncover a truth far more devastating than an affair. Neither of them spoke during the drive. Olivia sat in the back seat. Daniel sat beside the driver. I stared through the windshield while the city lights blurred together like memories I no longer trusted. 40 minutes earlier, I had been planning a romantic surprise. Now I was driving two strangers to my own house. The silence became unbearable. Finally, Daniel cleared his throat. Ethan, I'm sorry. I kept my eyes on the road. I don't want your apology. I understand. No, you don't. He looked down. I probably don't. When we reached the house, I unlocked the front door without saying a word. Everything looked exactly as we had left it. The framed wedding photograph still stood above the fireplace. Vacation pictures covered one wall. A handwritten note Olivia had once left inside the kitchen remained attached to the refrigerator. Don't work too late. I need my husband home. The words felt almost cruel now. I walked into the living room and placed the crushed bouquet on the coffee table. Several petals fell onto the floor. Nobody sat down. Nobody knew where to begin. I broke the silence. You said 8 months. Olivia slowly nodded. Yes. What changed? Tears rolled down her face again. I don't know exactly when it started. Try. She took a long breath. You were always traveling. I was building the company. I know. I was building our future. I know. Then why? She covered her face. Because somewhere along the way, I stopped feeling like I was part of your present. Her words landed heavily. Not because they excused anything, because they forced me to remember every anniversary dinner I had postponed, every weekend cancelled, every promise of next month I had worked to give us a better life. But somewhere inside that effort, life itself had quietly disappeared. Still, nothing justified betrayal. I looked at Daniel. How did you meet? We met at last year's transportation summit in Denver. My stomach tightened. That conference, the one I couldn't attend because of the software crisis. He continued carefully. We became friends first. I almost laughed. That's always how these stories begin. He didn't argue. You're right. Olivia wiped her tears. I should have told you. Yes. I tried several times. When? She looked toward the window. Every time you came home exhausted. I remembered those nights, walking through the front door with my laptop still open, answering emails during dinner, falling asleep on the couch. She had often looked disappointed. I thought she simply missed me. I never imagined she was carrying another life inside her heart. The room became silent again. Then Daniel said something neither of us expected. I ended it. Olivia turned toward him immediately. Ethan deserves to know. I frowned. What do you mean? Daniel looked directly at me. When I learned how much you still loved your wife, I walked away. Olivia closed her eyes. It happened 3 weeks ago. I stared at both of them. You ended the relationship. He nodded. I refused to become the reason a marriage ended. The irony almost made me smile. You should have thought about that 8 months earlier. I should have. No excuses. No arguments. Just regret. For the first time since the airport, I believed he was telling the truth. I turned back toward Olivia. If it was over, why were you holding his hand? She began crying harder than before. Because today was goodbye. Neither of us spoke. He drove me to the airport. She struggled to continue. I thought once I got on that plane, I would come home and tell you everything. I searched her face for any sign of another lie. Instead, I saw fear, shame, exhaustion. I was terrified. You should have been. I know. I would have respected the truth. I know. But instead, I looked toward the wedding photograph above the fireplace. You gave me memories I'll never erase. She whispered my name. I didn't answer. Instead, I walked to the fireplace and removed the photograph from its frame. For several seconds, I simply stared at it. Two young people smiling with complete confidence, certain that love alone could overcome anything. My mother's words echoed through my mind once again. Loyalty is not tested when life is easy, Ethan. It is tested when nobody would ever know the difference. I finally understood. Character isn't measured by opportunity. It's measured by the choices we make when temptation quietly invites us to become someone else. Daniel picked up his coat. I should leave. I nodded. You should. Before reaching the door, he stopped. There is one more thing. Neither Olivia nor I spoke. He reached into his briefcase and placed a sealed envelope on the coffee table. I think you need to read this. My heartbeat slowed. What is it? It explains why Olivia spent so much time in Seattle. Olivia's face immediately lost all color. Daniel, no more secrets. He looked at me one final time. I'm truly sorry. Then he walked out the front door. The house became completely silent. I stared at the envelope. It wasn't thick, only a few documents. Yet somehow it felt heavier than everything that had happened inside the airport. Slowly, I reached for it. And as I broke the seal, I realized the affair wasn't the biggest secret my wife had been hiding. My hands trembled as I opened the envelope. Inside were only 4 sheets of paper. The first was a consulting agreement. The second listed travel reimbursements. The third contained hotel reservations. The fourth was a letter addressed to Olivia. I read every page twice, then a third time. None of them changed the truth. Daniel's company had offered Olivia a position almost 9 months earlier. The salary was nearly double what she earned with us. She had accepted the offer in secret. The affair began shortly afterward. Every conference in Seattle, every unexpected business dinner, every extra meeting. She had been building another career while pretending to protect the one we had built together. I placed the papers back inside the envelope. For several minutes, neither of us spoke. The silence no longer felt angry. It felt exhausted. Olivia finally looked at me. I was going to resign after this trip. I nodded slowly. I believe you. She looked surprised. You do? Yes. She frowned. Then why do you still look at me like that? I answered honestly. Because believing you now doesn't erase what happened before. Tears rolled down her cheeks again. I never stopped loving you. I closed my eyes. Those words would have saved our marriage a year earlier. Now they only reminded me how complicated love could become when honesty disappeared. My mother used to tell me something, I said quietly. Love can survive hardship, but trust cannot survive hidden choices. I understand now. I wish we had understood sooner. She lowered her head. So do I. For the first time that night, I sat across from her instead of standing. We looked less like husband and wife, more like two strangers trying to understand where they had lost each other. I need to ask one question. She nodded. Anything. If I hadn't surprised you at the airport, would you have told me the truth? She didn't answer immediately. That silence told me everything. Finally, she whispered, I want to believe I would have. I smiled sadly. But you don't know. No, neither do I. The honesty in that answer hurt, but it also brought something unexpected. Peace. Not because the pain disappeared. Because uncertainty finally did. There would always be questions without answers. I no longer wanted to build my future around them. The next morning, I called my mother. She listened without interrupting. I expected disappointment. Instead, she asked only one question. My son, how is your heart? Broken. It will heal. I don't know if I can forgive this. She was quiet before replying. Forgiveness is not pretending nothing happened. It's refusing to let someone else's choices become the prison of your own future. I wrote those words down. They stayed on my desk for months. Later that afternoon, Olivia and I met with attorneys. There were no shouting matches, no public accusations, no fight over furniture or bank accounts. We divided everything fairly. She asked for very little. I offered more than the law required. My lawyer looked confused. You don't have to do this. I know. Then why? Because I don't want my last decision as her husband to be motivated by anger. The papers were signed 2 weeks later. When the judge finalized our divorce, neither of us smiled. Some endings are too heavy for celebration. Outside the courthouse, Olivia stopped me before I reached my car. Ethan! I turned. I'm truly sorry. For the first time since the airport, I believed every word. I know. I hope one day you'll remember more than my worst mistake. I thought carefully before answering. I will. Her eyes filled with tears. Goodbye. Goodbye, Olivia. She walked away without looking back. I watched until she disappeared into the crowd. Oddly enough, I didn't feel hatred. Only sadness for the life we couldn't protect. Over the following year, I poured my energy into rebuilding myself instead of escaping my memories. I exercised regularly, spent weekends with my mother, visited old friends I had neglected while chasing success. I also changed the culture inside my company. No employee would ever be praised for sacrificing family to impress me. We introduced mandatory vacations, protected weekends whenever possible, encouraged parents to attend school events without guilt. Profit still mattered. People mattered more. One afternoon, my mother visited the office. She smiled as employees laughed together in the cafeteria. You've changed this place. I had to. She squeezed my hand. And you've changed too. I hope for the better. She nodded. Pain can make a heart bitter. She smiled gently. Or it can make a heart wiser. I finally understood what she had been teaching me all my life. Success isn't measured by how much you earn. It's measured by who you become after life gives you every reason to become someone else. The airport took my marriage, but it did not take my character. And in the end, that became the greatest victory of all. One lesson changed the way I now look at every relationship, whether it's marriage, friendship, or business. Trust is never protected by grand romantic gestures. It is protected by small daily habits repeated over time. Honest conversations matter more than expensive gifts. Listening matters more than winning arguments. Many couples wait until resentment becomes unbearable before talking about loneliness, disappointment, or unmet expectations. By then, silence has already done its damage. Healthy relationships require regular communication, shared goals, and the courage to discuss uncomfortable subjects before they become permanent wounds. Success at work should never come at the expense of the people waiting for you at home, because promotions can be